Folks, Canadian Prepper here. Welcome back to the not-so-daily dose of doom and gloom. You'll have to forgive me. I've been on a slight hiatus for the past few days as I partake in a bit of a survival challenge of sorts, if you can call it that, by first world standards. It probably is a little bit of one, and that has had me mostly preoccupied and somewhat indisposed for the last few days, but the show must go on. Now, if you guys are like me, you roll out in the bed in the morning and you ask yourself, man, is everything that I've been thinking and saying about the current situation, am I just completely out to lunch? And if you don't have that kind of self-doubt to be motivating you to dig deeper and deeper, and you just find yourself satisfied with an answer and you just run with it, then chances are you are likely going to make a lot of errors in your assessment of the situation. As the saying goes, as the island of my knowledge grows, so does the shoreline of my ignorance. And I can tell you right now, I have absolutely no idea what is going on, but I sure as hell know that something is going on, and I'm going to provide you with a variety of data points in addition to the thousands that I've been providing you this year so far that are going to substantiate that claim. Now, here we go. We have a massive nuclear war simulation being conducted by the U.S. military today. All the birds are up in the sky as we speak. A lot of military activity all around the world. Synchronized, simultaneous nuclear war drills on every single continent. What the hell does it all mean? We're going to talk about the Russians doing their own Arctic nuclear war simulation and putting their Pacific fleet on high alert whilst testing a nuclear-capable ICBM only days after testing one in Kazakhstan. We have Russia evacuating a critical oblast in the Zaporozhye region, or making emergency preparations to evacuate both the children and the staff at the nuclear facility there. We have North Korea, who still remains silent. No communication yet on deconfliction channels for many, many days still. We have Warren Buffett making a move in February, or it might have been early March, which essentially predicts the Taiwan war. And if I'm going to listen to anybody about financial markets, if there's any canary in the coal mine, it's definitely Mr. Warren Buffett. We got the leak row. Was it an inside job? Was he a planned, disinformant? Was this just some patsy that the government is trying to pin this on, or is it a little bit of everything? There's a lot of convolution going on right now, a lot of ambiguity. The Russians are not necessarily buying it that these leaks are legitimate, and the mainstream media seems to be singing about it an awful lot. But what is real and what isn't? We're going to talk about leak row today and some hypotheses that have been speculated by some former CIA, former intelligence guys, all right? So take it with a grain of salt. Some people say once an intelligence agent, always an intelligence agent. I don't necessarily think so. I think we give the government too much credit for how smart they are sometimes, or how smart they are not, I should say. Anyways, we got South Korea firing warning shots at a North Korean ship. Apparently, the North Korean ship was pursuing a Chinese vessel, and it strayed into South Korean waters, and the South Koreans shot overhead. And unfortunately for us, it did not exercise in light of the fact that there is no de-escalation channel open at this point in time. We have France beginning the final stage of their Orion military exercise, which is being conducted with all NATO countries. This is just 1 month before one of the biggest air exercises in history is going to be taking place in Europe right now. Remember, there are no military exercises, only World War III disguises. If a new war is going to break out, it's going to do so under the guise of an exercise. China's military is preparing for not only war with Taiwan, but explicitly stated they are preparing for nuclear war. They ran some successful tests of anti-ballistic missiles that they were able to effectively shoot down an ICBM. And in addition to that, their defense minister is currently in Moscow visiting with Vladimir Putin face to face. Guys, this is big. There's big, big things that are happening all around the world. All the strategic playing pieces are being moved into position. There's a major civil war brewing in Sudan, being currently fought as we speak in Sudan. TikTok is on track to be completely banned in the United States, possibly by the end of this month. Montana is the first state to commit to it. We also have an apocalyptic sandstorm in China in the past few days. We have the Marburg virus spreading to more countries in Africa, a bird flu human infection, and everybody's talking about the collapse of the US dollar. And yes, all of the naval bases in the United States are currently on high security, high alert. Does it have something to do with DEFCON, or is it more ado with trying to contain any more leakage that could happen? Well, we're going to talk all about it today. So where do we start? Let's just start with a few videos, because I know you guys are visual learners. We got a bunch of Ukrainians apparently marching somewhere, doing some kind of training somewhere. Now the grass looks pretty green, so I presume that this must be somewhere where the grass is green. Is the grass green yet in Ukraine? I'm going to guess that it probably isn't, but I could be wrong about that. So if it isn't, I'm going to presume that this is likely in another European country. We know that they are training battalions, brigades of Ukrainian troops in the UK, I believe in Poland and many other places. So this very well may be what that's about. Now there's this odd sense of calm on the Western Front right now, with the exception of Bakhmut and some fighting that's erupting in Zaporozhye. But to me, it all seems incredibly eerie and reminiscent of what would happen when a tsunami was about to come to shore. First, you would see this pullback. You would see the water retract out to sea before the giant wave came in, because first it would suck all that water out to sea, and then it would send it all back with a violent force. And it appears as though that is what's happening around the world. There's this calm right now. Everybody is just setting up, waiting for the next move. If you didn't see the last video where I interviewed he has a master's degree, David Pine, one of the theories that he put forth in that video, and we didn't really get to it till later in the video, but he thinks that Russia is waiting to make any major moves until China joins the war in some capacity. Now, the Chinese defense minister is in Russia right now talking with Vladimir Putin. A lot of that conversation has not been public. We know Xi went there for 3 long days, and you can bet that they were making preparations to synchronize and coordinate whatever sort of activities they're planning to do in the future. They're talking about openly doing joint military exercises, and it should be reminded that this isn't something that happened prior to the conflict, okay? This isn't something that we seen happen too often, or this level of cooperation between the Chinese and the Russians, all a testament to how far we've come within this conflict. Now, these are 20 self-propelled howitzers that are going from Italy to Ukraine. And there is most definitely plans for a major Ukrainian offensive in the works. Is that exactly as was depicted in the leaks is the question. It appears as though, if anything, the leaks serve to create more fog in the fog of war and create more, to hopefully, I guess, create some indecisiveness on the part of the Russians. Maybe there was some truth, maybe there wasn't. The leader of the Donbass, Denis Pushlin, is not buying the leaks or what they purport in those leaks. He expects that it's likely a disinformation campaign. However, many rather contrarian and typically independent-minded journalists in this space are saying, no, they're real. It's just, what is the motive behind their release? And again, everybody has an opinion on that, just like everybody has a you-know-what. But we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But just so you know, something big is coming here. We also have a fire in the town of Belgorod. I believe this is a power plant in the city of Belgorod. A drone just struck. Now, again, with a lot of these drones that are hitting Russia, Russia needs to, of course, balance its sensitivity to commercial passenger flights, because it doesn't want to have another one of those situations on its hands where it shoots down a passenger jet, and military aircraft. Okay, so it's very likely that Ukraine, in a sense, has a bit of an advantage when not all of Russia is in a state of martial law and no-fly zone, because they can fly these drones in and Russia doesn't know, is this a commercial plane, is it a passenger plane? And yes, there are ways that you can identify it, and they do have anti-aircraft detection capability and whatnot, but it's still a little bit more difficult, I would presume, if you have commercial flights up in the air, and you're trying to shoot these down or trying to spot potential threats. So things are definitely escalating under the surface. The Russians are digging all types of fortifications and trenches. The Ukrainians now seem to have, some people are expecting that they're going to make a move in the Zaporozhye region, which is why all the fighting is erupting there. But it's very hard to say at this point. I don't know what to believe, to be brutally honest. If you take the leaks at face value, then yes, indeed, there's a counteroffensive being planned. NATO, specifically the United States, is instrumental in orchestrating that whole thing. And it's about to happen soon, possibly in the next few weeks. But we just simply do not know. Are they trying to pretend like they're weaker than they are, stronger than they are? It's really hard to say, guys. Anyways, what else do we got going on in the world? Let's just go around the map here and find out. Now, I came across this this app. I believe it's called Skyglass. And as you can see, there's all kinds of, it's kind of neat, you know, it shows you a 3D view. It shows you the altitude that the planes are flying. These are all military planes, I believe. And, you know, you can see there's a whole lot of military activity, especially right now in light of the fact that they're doing their annual nuclear exercise that I believe was canceled last year, because they did not want to be provocative to the Russians. They've went ahead with it this year because, of course, we are most definitely at a higher DEFCON level in light of everything that has been going on. We have a dedicated video coming up to try to illustrate to people just how far we've come, because most people, we've become desensitized to this, talking about this every day, and we forget that just a little over a year ago, most people weren't talking about nuclear war at all. Now it's pretty much the headline issue. Well, when, you know, some celebrity doesn't do something stupid, that is. But, you know, understand that these flight radar systems, they're nifty and all, but in many ways, to me, it's almost the equivalent of reading like market technicals, like technical analysis. It's pretty much astrology. If the military is going to do a clandestine operation, you're really never going to know, because they're going to turn off their transponders. And because of that, all you can really glean from this type of information is maybe some deterrence. Yes, you can glean a bit about exercises, potential planning down the road, but you don't know when these types of exercises are going to become real world. Like, for instance, right now, you can go over to Europe and you can see that the US has a lot of spy planes up in the sky. Maybe not right now as I do this video. But, you know, you can, that's good information to know, but it's kind of a given at this point in time. What's this one around Kaliningrad here? What is this here? Oh, it's around Lithuania. Anyway, so it's somewhat useful information, but I wouldn't get so caught up in this, because you can just end up wasting a whole lot of time. You know, there's a lot of open source intelligence gatherers that really do a deep dive into this, and at the end of the day, are they really discovering anything that, you know, the government doesn't want them to? If there was actionable information, the government would not allow their planes to have the transponders on. If anything, I would, at this point in the game, if we see no activity in the sky, that's when I would get very concerned, because that almost means it's almost like a sign of everything is somewhat okay. Like, it's almost a sign of DEFCON 3, not 2. If you're seeing birds in the air, once they turn their transponders off, that's when I would be concerned. And that's when the war is going to start. You're never going to see it unfold from here. Like, you're never going to see, you know, if a nuclear war broke out today and they had to send all the bombers up, they ain't going up with their transponders on. Okay, you're not going to be able to watch the show on flight radar or any of these nifty flight radar apps. So don't obsess about this stuff. Yeah, it looks cool and it makes us look like we know what we're talking about, but at the end of the day, I mean, it's kind of more for hobbyists, I think, than actual open source intelligence gathering. But it's a factor. It's definitely a contributing factor for sure. On the topic of that, let's just go over and check out this nuclear exercise that's been going on. We talked about this last week. In fact, it started a few days ago. U.S. Strategic Command commences annual nuclear command and control exercise. So this is big, all right? So they got all kinds of planes, you know, Stratofortress planes, doomsday planes, bombers, the whole 9 yards. They're making all sorts of pathways around the North American continent today. And of course, you have heightened security procedures set at all U.S. Navy installations. I don't know if that has something to do with what's going on overseas. Does that have something to do with the leaks? Does that have something to do with the ongoing exercises that are occurring? And why is it, is it only at naval stations? That really is the question. Heightened security procedures have been set at all U.S. Navy installations on Friday. Pensacola and all other U.S. Navy installations have been directed by higher authorities to set a heightened security posture. Interesting. DoD identification cardholder escorting privileges are still permitted. Geez, I cannot talk today, guys. Must be this survival challenge I'm doing. Definitely has me just slightly indisposed, but I'll be all right. It's a first world challenge. We're going to live. If anything, it's better to do it now than have to really suffer after the shizzy hits the fizzy. Now, before I talk about, actually, no, we should probably, I was going to go to the Warren Buffett stuff, because for me, that's almost, that makes me 90% confident that something is going to, in fact, happen in the Taiwan Strait in the not so distant future. And the reason why that is so incredibly important, there's a lot of people who are like, Taiwan, I don't care about what happens in Taiwan one bit, all-American prepper. But you will when all of our stores are empty because we can't get anything from China. And we really need to come to terms with that reality, that will be the reality. If China invades Taiwan or causes a blockade of Taiwan, then there will be a suspension of shipments from China, not all at once, but there will be sanctions, and then it will escalate to maybe some sort of embargo, and then it will escalate into a full-on war and cyber attacks. They're already saying that they anticipate a major cyber war with China when the war with Taiwan starts, which is pretty much inevitable at this point, because now the U.S., in all of their infinite wisdom, decided to send 24 defense contractors to Taiwan. Well, what could go wrong? Well, the Chinese have already set up an aircraft carrier fleet in between Taiwan and the U.S. military bases, as well as committed to checking various ships and doing inspections of various commercial vessels that might house weapons. So we are most definitely on the brink. Anyways, we'll talk about that more in just a minute. We got to talk about what's going on in Russia. There's a few data points to consider. Russia recently just committed to changing their way that they're going to mobilize their troops. So no longer is a guy going to come and knock at the door and give you some papers. Okay, that was way too cumbersome. Now everything is going to be done digitally. And when you get the email, if you do not respond to the email, then you will be cut off from acquiring various services, such as getting a loan, moving into a new apartment, registering as self-employed, or driving a vehicle. This was rushed through the State Duma earlier this week. So we're hearing all this talk right now because it's Easter, the Orthodox Easter, and there's a bit of quiet on the Western Front. We're hearing this talk about the Wagner leader saying, oh, we need to end the war and all this stuff. And as great as that would be, to me, it's a total head fake at this point in time. That's all that is, unfortunately, because everything else, judge them by what they're doing, not by what they're saying. And even the Wagner leader somewhat walked back those comments and clarified that he was just saying that, yes, ideally, we would come to the negotiating table and would encourage Vladimir Putin to come to the negotiating table, but understanding that that's not a reality because, of course, the hardliners in Ukraine are still committed to fully taking back the entire country, including Crimea. So the Russians, concurrently to this, are putting their Pacific Fleet on high alert. They did an emergency surprise test. Sergei Shoigu clarified this was done as part of a surprise combat readiness check. And during this check, and as a part of this exercise, they also tested out their strategic forces, okay? So this is absolutely critical. This is not something that you would see just happen out of the blue on the same day that the United States was conducting their own nuclear war simulation in light of everything else that's going on, including the Arctic activities, including all the Chinese nuclear testing that's been going on lately and the deployment of the U.S. early warning systems out in the Pacific. All these things are coinciding for a reason. As much as we would like to hope and think that things are starting to quiet down a little bit. Again, back to the tsunami metaphor, I believe it's just kind of pulling out and it's going to hit us with all manner of apocalyptic scenario in the not so distant future. Another data point to consider is that Putin has canceled the Victory Day parade. Okay, so this signals that either they're worried about security inside. Some people are saying, oh, they don't have enough resources and equipment to do that. I don't necessarily think so. It doesn't take a huge chunk out of the Russian budget or their allotment of armaments in order to put on these parades, maybe, you know, a few dozen vehicles and, you know, 1,000 or so guys. But it wouldn't take much to have a Victory Day parade. For obvious reasons, maybe they're not. Obviously, they had one last year in spite of the fact that they had not reached their goals yet. So people are concerned and that this is a sign that something is going on. Now, just the simple fact that you have the Chinese defense minister going there on the same day, Putin cancels the Victory Day parade. They placed the Pacific Fleet on high alert and they push through this legislation that is going to fast-track mobilization while evacuating both children and staff from the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, or planning to evacuate staff. And the level of fortifications they've done in and around that place tells us that the storm is coming. It's just a matter of when is it coming. That really is the question at this point, and I do not have all the answers with respect to that. Just a bit more detail on this nuclear war drill. Vladimir Putin ordered the Pacific Fleet to undertake surprise war games to test their readiness to stage a retaliatory nuclear strike on the West. The Pacific Fleet's strategic firepower has been since Soviet times as Moscow's main weapon in retaliatory strikes. Now, I'm hearing a lot from some of the geopolitical analysts that, well, you know, the Chinese and Russian relationship is rather tenuous at best. It's mostly incidental, and that they're really, at their core, enemies with one another. But to that, I would say they're not enemies in the same way that the Russians versus the Japanese are enemies, okay? They're not enemies in the same way that the Chinese and the Japanese are enemies. You know, the Chinese and the Russians have tag team on the Korean Peninsula during the Korean War. The Russians played a limited role, but a role nonetheless. In the same way they played a role in the Vietnam War. It was the Soviets and the Chinese. So while there was some border clashes here and there between Russia and China throughout the years, and no doubt they do share a huge border. China has this huge population. It's an obvious threat. They would love nothing more than to capture some of those Russian resources. I don't think that the divide between Russia and China is such that it would have escalated into a full-on conflict, even if none of this stuff was a problem for many, many decades to come. So the enmity between the West and these countries is much, much bigger than any sort of infighting would ever emerge. And the fact that you've had the leader go there for 3 days and now the defense minister and all this provocation around Taiwan, it's like we're just pushing them for a war. There's something going on in Washington that is just pushing us into a major, major conflict with the West. I've analyzed this 16 different ways from Sunday on this channel before. Is it they're trying to deplete the Russians in order to get to the Chinese? You know, what is the strategy that the elites are trying to play? I've talked about de-dollarization for years now. In fact, you know, I was watching a video. Occasionally I'll go back and see what I got right and what I got wrong. And there was a video I released, I think it was December of 2020. Okay, we know that was a wild time to be alive. And at that time, I made a video called De-Dollarization and World War III. Now, there were a couple cringe moments in that video, but I pretty much in that video explain exactly what is happening today. Not to toot my own horn. Okay, I am a little bit. Yeah, you don't get much. You don't get much in this job. There are no participation badges here. You got to earn it. And when I'm right, I'm right. But when I'm wrong, you know I'm wrong. I'm occasionally wrong, which is why I say, guys, the day you wake up in the morning, you think that you got this stuff figured out, then the universe is going to humble you, okay? So China has tested a new DF-27 hypersonic ICBM that can penetrate mainland U.S. defense systems. This is all from the fairly reputable Eurasia Times. Okay, I get a lot of information from their military analysis archive. Among a sea of disclosures made by leaked classified Pentagon documents is the alarming revelation that China tested a long-range hypersonic missile dubbed DF-27 that can penetrate U.S. mainland defenses. Now, I'm very skeptical about our anti-ballistic missile technology as is. I don't know if it would even work, how well it would work, considering a lot of these new ICBM, that is intercontinental ballistic nuclear missiles, can have multiple warheads, and they also fire off a lot of decoys at the same time. And these things are going thousands and thousands, like 20,000 kilometers an hour plus. So the idea of hitting one in the first place successfully, especially when it's at the re-entry point, when it's going at its fastest speed, or in getting the right one and being able to hit all 50 of the things, the 10 warheads and the 40 decoys, is limited at best. On that note, these leaks, this was such a huge set of leaks. Now, if you listen to this channel, however, what I found is that none of what was said in the leaks is nothing that we haven't been saying or speculating on for a long time, especially with what David Pine's been talking about. David Pine comes up with this stuff, and I'm like, where do you get all this information? And later on, it turns out to be true. Well, get a load of this. This is back in December, okay? China has more nuclear warheads on ballistic missiles than U.S. Key determination by STRATCOM, Strategic Command, gives rise to this speculation. They've been saying that the Chinese have only had 400 nuclear warheads for decades. Do you really think that's true when everything else in China, when China's GDP has gone up thousands and thousands of percentile points? Yes, you heard correct. Since the 90s, I don't know what it is, but it used to be less than $1 trillion. Now it's well over 30 trillion in terms of, I believe, not their nominal, but their PPP, purchasing power parity, the largest in the world. So the idea that a country that does every single thing in secret has not improved on their nuclear capabilities is just foolish. So of course, we should absolutely assume that they have probably 10 times the amount of warheads, and that's what he says they do. And this article from the Eurasia Times somewhat corroborates that hypothesis. So we know that they have more nukes, okay? And now they're even shooting down nuclear-capable ICBMs, possibly by the HQ-19 missile in the latest anti-ballistic missile test as tensions mount with the U.S. So between the Chinese and the Russians, they have the potential to take out the bulk, or at least, 90% of U.S. nukes, and absorb just a small enough blow that they could likely continue on. It would be a total disaster, but they could win the war and then hold the United States hostage with the remaining nuclear weapons. So this is how they win a nuclear war. Now, do I think that they're that crazy that they're going to go that far? No, but they could. Some people speculate that that's the plan. Because if you have the hypersonics, if you can take out the satellites, if you can jam the command and control, if you can do cyber warfare and all types of electronic warfare, you can drastically limit the ability for the U.S. to respond. And then there's the EMP factor. The EMPs could potentially be so powerful nowadays that they could couple down deep into the missile silos and even disable, the EMP-hardened missile silos. So we just don't know what they have, okay? And this is the problem, is that Xi is warning his forces to prepare for actual combat. The president told troops at a Navy base that their mission is to defend this country's territorial sovereignty and that they need to prepare for real combat. We simply don't know what they're up to. They do a lot of things underground. They move things underground. They have underground bases. They build whole islands. I mean, this is Chinese we're talking about. And you could say, oh, they build cheap crap. And as I've said before, they build cheap crap because that's what we want. We want cheap stuff. If you don't want cheap stuff, you have to pay a premium for that stuff. That used to be the case back in the day, decades ago, where you would go and you'd buy that one thing. It would be a huge investment, but it would last you a long time, okay? We don't want that. The fact that China is building cheap stuff and is highly pollutant. It's because we've offloaded a lot of our carbon effect into China. So they absorb all of the pollution, they do all the work, they produce all the stuff, and then we come back and we say, oh, this cheap thing doesn't work. Well, what do you expect? You're getting a TV, a flat screen 4K, 8K TV for $200. Okay, the technological deflation on that is staggering, and that's the only thing that has offset inflation since, we started printing money like there is no tomorrow. So you can blame the Chinese all you want, and I by no means am a supporter of the communist regime or what they do there, or TikTok. In fact, as I've said before, I think TikTok likely should be banned. And I know it's not a popular opinion because a lot of people are saying, well, it's a Trojan horse because the government's going to come in, they're going to over-regulate, they're going to overreach, and they're going to censor the internet. And that may well be the case. But the fact of the matter is that we don't have a TikTok there because of the Great China Firewall. It's simply not fair that the Chinese can come in here and subject our population, who's already dumbed down enough, but dumb us down even more and surveil us at the same time. So think about it. It's a one-way mirror, and in a free market society, if we're talking about on a global scale, then we should be able to do to them what they're doing to us. But that simply is not the case, which is why TikTok will likely be banned. Speaking of China, there were some apocalyptic sandstorms. I know I'm going all over the place, but this is how my brain works, okay? I just see it all at once. I try to see it all at once. I try to give you guys a meta-analysis. Look at these pictures. I mean, this is insane. This is like an apocalyptic level snowstorm. There's some massive droughts going on in the world right now. Just weird climate anomalies happening in China. This is something out of something biblical almost. That gets overused. People say, Nate, everybody's predicting the end of the world since, the times of Jesus, if you believe in Jesus, or the time of Moses, if you believe in Moses. And while that is the case, in the past, riddle me this, did they have nuclear weapons? Did they have a population which has in many ways peaked? Did they have a population crack-up boom like we have right now? Did they have artificial and general intelligence on the horizon? Did we have, what else? What other, did we have contagions running all around the world? Sure, we might have had that, but did we have the global transport network to facilitate the fast spread of something like that? Did we have biowarfare? No. The fact is, even though, yes indeed, when was it the year 1000 AD? The turn of 1000 AD, everybody thought the world was going to end. So nobody was doing work, nobody was planning, but the thing is, there was no way for the world to end there. There was not even the end of the world as we know it. Sure, the bubonic plague happened, and that, for many people, was, the end of the world as we know it. And of course, the Enlightenment came after that, so of course we can expect that there is going to be some massive population correction in the not-so-distant future, because that's just the nature of things, right? But after that, hopefully, we find ourselves in an artificially intelligent generated utopia of sorts, but I'm not holding my breath on that. So anyways, that's why I talk about these things. That's why, if anybody tries to throw that criticism, well, people have thought things were going to end. And do I think the world's going to end? No. I think that it's going to be the end of the world as we know it. Yes, I think things are going to change absolutely drastically, especially if we're talking about World War III. Anyways, sandstorms are creating a havoc in China right now. This is the International Drought Monitor. This is the standardized precipitation index over the past month. And as you can see, a good chunk of Canada is in drought. The Midwest is in drought, obviously in the desert, that's drought. Parts of Europe are in drought. I was watching Survival Lily's video the other day. Apparently they are getting a little bit of precipitation now, but they've been in a massive drought as well. And you can just see that the lack of precipitation in the Arctic, as the Arctic sea ice continues to melt, altering weather patterns, and now we are at the beginning of, is it El Nino or La Nina? I can't remember which one it is, but it's the hot one. So expect to get cooked this summer, definitely next summer, but get yourself an air conditioner while you still can. But air conditioners make the problem worse, so hey, there's no getting out of here alive. Anyways, as I said, heading down to Taiwan, the U.S. arms industry planning the first Taiwan trip in 4 years. What a great time. I mean, what a great time to promote the One China policy and, strategic ambiguity by sending arms contractors, 25 of them in fact, to Taiwan next month. I mean, if we ever wanted to, boost the global markets, boost trade, get on China's good side, the best thing that we could possibly do is try to, commandeer and subvert the people of Taiwan to our beck and command. China put forward an aircraft carrier group. The United States is removing the most valuable from the coast. So China is flexing its muscles and limiting itself to warnings for now. But they do have an aircraft carrier group in and around here somewhere that's still moving around. So as much as these exercises have been officially suspended, they do have a much larger default military presence there now. They recently declared a no-fly zone north of Taiwan that the Taiwanese did honor. We talked about that last week, and it was to launch a weather satellite, and it went off without a hitch. There wasn't any major altercations, okay, but the Taiwanese initially rejected China's call for a no-fly zone. Obviously, it's not your country. Well, so the Taiwanese think. The Chinese think otherwise. And but they were able to find some common ground. They were able to make a compromise, and it was a much shorter window in which this no-fly zone was implemented. So just one other thing that we avoided escalation there. We have the U.S. and South Korea kicking off large-scale combined air drills this week. And this is while the North Koreans continue to not pick up the phones on the deconfliction hotline. This is very, very concerning, and it's strange that all this is happening now. I mean, a person really has to ask themselves, why now? Why the Korean military and why the potential for Korean war at this stage in the game? What is it about what's happening right now? And it's because what's happening in China and Taiwan is linked with North Korea. It's a proxy. It's yet another proxy conflict. It's China and the U.S. fighting on the Korean Peninsula. That's all it is. So it's either of these conflicts fans the flames of the other, so to speak. There was that warning shot fired after a North Korean boat incursion. Seoul said it fired warning shots and broadcast warnings to expel a North Korean vessel that crossed a disputed maritime border. But it ended there. No nukes were fired, not like that scare that they had in Japan there the other day where everybody was, or part of one of their islands, was sent into the bunkers because there was a ICBM threat from the North Koreans. Now, in terms of what's going on in Sudan, I'm not going to be one of these people that pretends to be an expert all of a sudden. I literally have no idea, but I do have a few maps, and one data point that we do know is that the Russians were about to build a naval base in Sudan just a few months ago. In fact, they got approval for it, I believe, in February. Well, now, all of a sudden, what a surprise. You got rebels fighting with the Sudanese armed forces. So, I mean, this is Sudan, okay? So we got rapid support forces in yellow here, and then we got the Sudanese armed forces in red, then we got the rebels in green. So it's various factions, various different groups fighting for power. Some people think that this is a good old classic color revolution, CIA fomented coup, but who really knows? I really don't know. All I know is that when times get difficult, that's when people start fighting with each other. And whether it's state-sponsored or, some sort of ideological subversion tactic by the U.S. government, it's hard to say. One thing I do know is that this Marburg virus continues to be a problem in Africa. It has now jumped to Malawi. In addition to Equatorial Guinea, Burundi, and Tanzania, it's also now in Malawi. Thankfully, this sort of thing is not airborne in the aerosolized sense, but it is potentially droplet airborne. And, we're in a point in time where things can spread. We need to be mindful of the fact that there is such a thing as biowarfare. So if we're talking about hybrid, what do they call it, fifth generation warfare, then biowarfare would be a component of that. Okay, what do we got going on in Europe here? So the Donbass leader questions the Pentagon leaks on Ukraine. Dennis Pushlin believes that revelations could have been intentional as a part of an attempt to mislead Russia, as we talked about earlier. And yeah, I don't know what to make of the leaks. I don't think anybody does at this point in time. A lot of people, like I said, former intelligence operatives believe, or some of them anyways, believe that yes, the majority of these leaks are legit, just the way they're written and whatnot. But many people think that there might be some disinformation in there, possibly. Maybe some of it's true, some of it's not. It's really, really difficult to say, guys. I think we're never really probably going to know. It's easy to take it at face value and say everything that's in the leaks is the height of U.S. intelligence information, but I'm not so convinced about that. I think that there probably is some shady dealings here. The timing of it, some people say, oh, it was some good Samaritan who leaked it to try to prevent nuclear war. Maybe, maybe not. But we do know that something is going on in Russia because we got fires in Belgorod. We got fires in different parts of Russia. We got the Crimean beaches closed to build trenches as the Ukrainian counteroffensive looms. We have occupants taking children out of Energoda, which is around the Energodar region, around in the Zaporozhye Oblast. And we have Russia preparing evacuation plan for Rosatom employees who are currently working in the nuclear power plant there. So we may well still see a nuclear situation. Now, I've showed you guys this Russian fortifications map. It's an interactive map. You can see that the concentration of Russian defensive forces is right around here because they know the Ukrainians will love nothing more than to come down and cut off Crimea, cut off that land bridge that they've been able to create there through Mariupol. So you can see this is an interactive map and you can zoom in. I'm not sure what this is called, just Russian fortifications interactive map. And you can click on each of these dots and it gives you the approximate address with respect to what these fortifications are. But you can see it's multi-layered in that direction, so it appears as though that there is going to be a major offensive in that direction. But it's still, it's anybody's ball game at this point. It's really hard to say. According to Russian intelligence, according to the leaks, the stalemate will force Ukraine to enact full mobilization. So we talked about Russian mobilization, but they're going to have to do the same in Kiev, and they're already starting to turn their back on Zelensky, it would appear. But again, you can never believe too much of what the independent alt perspective says either, because, like Douglas McGregor has been saying that Bakhmut's going to fall any day now for the last year almost. So every day I listen to that guy, yeah, the Ukrainians are finished, it's over, in 10 days, and so you gotta, yes, while they do speak confidently about a lot of matters, they've been wrong a lot, okay? I'm not saying I'm right all the time, I'm just saying there's two sides to this story, and there's a reason why the Russians are digging in the way they are. But Poland really wants in on this fight. They're gonna produce depleted uranium shells. Yeah, we'll do it. Why not? Poland's really scared of the Russians, man. They are really scared of the Russians, which is kind of ironic for reasons that people who know history and know what's really going on should realize. France forces prep for final phase of major multi-domain exercise. That's going down right now. What else do we got going down here? Okay, Italy transferring tanks, blah, blah, blah. Quit moving around the map, Sonny. My eyes are sore. Well, don't look at the map then. Just listen to what I got to say. Thanks for watching, by the way. Yes, this Warren Buffett thing. Okay. Warren Buffett says the threat of war was a consideration in his decision to dump the bulk of his $4 billion stake in the chip maker giant TSMC, the most advanced chip manufacturer in the world that you need for artificial general intelligence and cyber warfare and mining Bitcoin and any other sort of digital finance, whatever kind of stuff you want to do, and just computers in general. So very, very critical of importance. It's the new gold, as they say, or the new oil. Our data is the new oil, as they say. So this is a guy who has been able to yield, I think, something like a 20% return year over year or something crazy like that for many, many decades on end. So I'm not saying he knows everything, but one thing I will say about Buffett, back when people thought things were improving in the pandemic, I think he sold the airlines. It was sometime in June or July of 2020. And those airlines have yet to exceed the levels they were at. They've yet to really make any new highs since the time that he sold them, okay? So we all know that travel was going to come back, but there's just something about the way that guy thinks, and I think at this point in time, if I was to look at anybody for financial advice, it's probably going to be him in terms of what to prepare. Now, we differ in terms of gold because ideally he doesn't think gold serves much intrinsic value. In fact, he's anti-gold in most ways. He's the biggest anti-gold person there is. But in terms of his investment strategy at this point in time, guys, he sold a $4 billion stake in TSMC just months after buying it. This is a guy who holds long, like decades long. When he buys a stock, he holds on to it at least for 5 to 10 years. They sold it only a few months afterwards. What does that tell you? That tells you that he knows that the geopolitical issues are serious, they're real, and that this company has a chance of not surviving whatever is going to be coming. Because you know how people talk about the big tech moguls are worried about the next 6 months. We need a 6-month moratorium on artificial intelligence. Well, think about that, guys. 6 months. 6 months. We had Bob Moriarty on here just a few days ago, and he talked about how we're going to see 50 years of change in the next 6 months. Think about the time scale in which they're saying that we have before AGI could potentially destroy civilization as we know it, or likely just feed into and act as a catalyst for this war in some way, shape, or form. They're saying we need a 6-month moratorium. Not only are we never going to do that because China, and they say 6 months because they're confident that they're in the very least 6 months ahead of China. Probably they think they're a year or so ahead, but we really don't know about that either because China does everything in secret. I'm not as confident as the CEO of Palantir, who's saying things like, oh yeah, the Chinese are so far behind, we don't have to worry about it. I don't know about that. Anyways, that's concerning. That's very concerning. Just those 2 data points. Warren Buffett divested from TSMC. So we know that there's a war with Taiwan coming, or that the company is going to flop. We can almost, based on his track record for making these types of bets, there's a very, very good chance that that company either goes belly up, it gets commandeered, it gets taken off the, you're not going to be able to buy stock in it, or whatever the case might be. But if there's a war, it could cause hundreds of billions of dollars in damage to the company. And just the other data point that I was talking about there, that the tech moguls are saying we need 6 months. Not a year or two, 6 months. The time to prepare is now. The time to prepare is now. I don't know how much time we really have left. Pentagon goes on an AI hiring spree. Well, it's a little too late to bring machine learning capabilities to the battlefield. I would not be surprised if the Pentagon, in some way, shape, or form, or DARPA, was the ones who created this AI or this ChatGPT. In the same way that they make most of the creations. We're talking about Manhattan Project level stuff. Typically, a lot of people think that innovation is driven by the free market. Entrepreneurship is driven by the free market, but most of the innovation either comes from one of 2 things that are not free market related. Genius, okay, we're talking about the guy who's up until 4 in the morning thinking about stuff, or the girl, who just wants to understand the mysteries of the universe for its own sake. We're talking about Einstein. Einstein wasn't motivated by money at its core. Maybe, you know, later on there were some perks, but it's either motivated by genius or the government. Think about the moon. I know everybody, moon landing, blah, blah, blah. Think about the Apollo program. Think about the Manhattan Project. I know some of you guys don't even think nuclear weapons exist. Well, I can't help you anymore. You might as well just go somewhere else. What other things were? So many things were invented by the military. DEET was invented by the military. The bug spray, the only bug spray that pretty much works, was invented by the military. You have the internet, DARPANET, which was invented by the military. So I would not be surprised if the US government has some AI they're not even telling us about yet. I'm talking about Skynet level stuff. Speaking of AI, I said it, I called it. AI clones teen girl's voice in a $1 million kidnapping scam. Hey, we got your daughter. And somebody said I should have used the Terminator voice when I talked about that, because you remember the scene in the Terminator where he pretends to be the mom or whatever. And I didn't want to get a copyright strike, so I didn't do that. But yeah, that would have been a good soundbite. But yeah, so this is happening, guys. And Joe Rogan's got a new AI podcast where it's not him, it's just a bunch of AIs arguing with each other in his voice, and other guests like Donald Trump and many others. Sam Altman is one of them. And Sam Altman's voice in that exchange is incredibly convincing. If you haven't seen it yet, go and watch it. But man, AI is just about to flip the world upside down in all shapes and forms. It could be the saving grace, or it could be the catalyst to our demise with respect to this conflict, because we know they're going to attempt to, when you have a climate like this, where we're fighting with each other, okay? That's the climate you don't want to have AI developing in, because everybody's going to be secretive and everybody's going to presume that the other side has ulterior motives or is doing things in secret that they perhaps shouldn't be doing. So we're going to have to accelerate our efforts. We're going to double down. We're going to go even faster. That's why 6 months. Anyways, all this talk about, you know, expanding internet surveillance after Discord leaks, yeah, that's going to be a thing. I mean, that goes without saying. We know that's going to happen. There's already a thing called the NSA. It's been around for a while. Pretty much everything we do online is monitored and surveilled. We have this balloon row incident, apparently with these Chinese balloons that we're going over. This is from the leaks. So, you know, take from it what thou wilt. Oh, there's my Illuminati. There's my Illuminati nod. Do as thou wilt. Do as thou wilt with that information. Chinese stratospheric balloons, they were naming them alphabetically. And I believe the ones that we've seen, they were already on W. So that gives you a sense of how many of these balloons they know about. They know exactly what these balloons can do. They were pretending like they didn't the whole time. If these leaks are 100% true, they know where they're made. I talked about that months ago. We showed you the province that they're made in. We showed you the actual place that these balloons are made in. And the Chinese have thousands of them. And they could deploy these and use them for all types of things, from EMP weapons to intelligence gathering to electronic warfare, the whole 9 yards, to giving them just a full spectrum understanding of what's going on in the battlefield at any given time. So guys, the shizzy's hitting the fizzy, the shizzy's getting real, and TikTok is about to be banned. Montana, the first state. Unfortunately, nobody lives there, so it doesn't really matter. But they do have some of the nuclear weapons, I do believe. So, you know, just get what you can while the getting is good. The best way to support this channel is to go gear up, CanadianPreparedness.com. We have a video trending right now. I'm probably traumatizing some of my new subscribers. Check this out. We have a video of the Silky Katana Boy 1000. Now, the reason why you want a saw in SHTF, and preferably a saw like this, which has impulse hardened teeth, okay? And this is like the world's biggest folding saw. I can't even fit it all on the screen here. This is a Katana Boy 1000. I'd honestly recommend the Katana Boy 650 or 500 for most people. But if you want to deforest a region near you, then you get the Katana Boy 1000. The reason why you want a saw instead of a chainsaw is because the volume, you don't want to be, you know, attracting too much attention if you have to procure firewood. There's also the moving parts issue, and there's also the gasoline issue. Now, some people are going towards electronic chainsaws, but moving parts again. And while, yes, there's definitely electric chainsaws that work fairly well, the power just simply isn't there, yet. But, and then the maintenance of those things is still, and having to sharpen those teeth, there's easy ways to do it, don't get me wrong. But nothing beats a handsaw. It's lightweight. There's so many advantages to it. And I should add, we are getting our shovels back in stock. So the world's greatest survival shovel, I did a video on this not too long ago. We're going to be doing another one in the not so distant future here. This thing is just an absolute monster. But by and large, those are secondary items, I would say. Well, maybe not the saw, depending on where you live. But yeah, food, water, shelter, means of self-defense, medical supplies. You got to get all these things locked in while you can, because one of these days, those big boats with all the shipping containers, they're just not going to be coming here anymore. They're going to be going somewhere else. So get it while the getting is good. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Canadian Prepper out.